Good evening and welcome. The Department of Finance has published a series of detailed reviews which show how much tax relief schemes cost the Exchequer in lost revenue. Fine Gael said the review raised serious questions about the way the government has been using tax-based incentives. 3 different reports outline the costs across a number of schemes. A series of construction and property reliefs cost the Exchequer almost €2.5 billion. The estimated cost of pension reliefs, including those for PAYE workers, cost €1.4 billion up to 2001. The artists' exemption cost the Exchequer almost €23 million in 2002. Investment in private hospitals and nursing homes had a tax cost of €60 million.
Section 23 apartments in Tallaght. People who buy these type of properties can let them out without paying tax on the rental income. For the first time, the government has published the real cost of these reliefs. It revealed property reliefs cost the Exchequer almost €2 billion. 3/4 of that went on urban renewal, which helped to revitalise rundown areas. But the review said schemes in some rural areas had failed to deliver value for money. Consultants Indicon were hired by the government to review some of the other tax schemes.
I think a number were overused in the sense that the incentives that were provided were no longer needed in the economy. And I think we saw that in the hotel sector, where utilisation levels in hotel had fallen, and a lot of the supply was being driven by the tax incentives.
The review revealed that in one case an individual took a €25 million lump sum from their pension tax-free.
If you contrast that with last week's debate about people with no pension getting a bonus of €2,500 in relation to an SSIA of €7,500, it certainly indicates that in tax in this country we have one law really for the super wealthy and another law for everybody else.
Finance Minister Brian Cowen restricted or closed many of the tax reliefs in last week's finance bill. One good example of these tax reliefs was the relief for building hotels. That cost the Exchequer €125 million, and generally it was used by people who earned more than €200,000. But the review found it didn't do a lot of good, and it wasn't really needed. As a result, the government is winding it down, all of which prompts the question why the government didn't do this type of analysis years ago. David Murphy, RTE News at the Department of Finance in Dublin.
And our economics editor, George Lee, joins me now from Government Buildings. George, a lot of information today on a lot of tax breaks, a lot of figures about tax foregone. Were these breaks ill-judged?
Well, I think if one were to look at it right now, and certainly a lot of PAYE workers might look at the 900 pages that were published today by the Department of Finance and think it might drive them mad. But we have to remember that at the time when a lot of these tax breaks were brought in, the economy was different. It was designed, for instance, to get the building construction industry going in many areas where building and construction wasn't happening. We all know now that's completely different. So we hear it costs $2 billion in terms of property tax breaks. You might forget about all of the money that the government gets when they start selling houses in this country. Nearly $3 billion this year due in stamp duties, for instance. So when you look back at it, you might think it was unwise, but they were all brought in for very good reasons. What was unwise was never reviewing it, leaving things open-ended. And this was the first time that any finance minister has gone and looked at this and had a complete review of all of those tax breaks. So it's all relative. I don't think it would be perceived as being unwise at the time, just unwise not to look back and review it.
But looking to the future, George, are we looking now basically at the end of the tax breaks?
I doubt it, Anne, because when you think about it, the government knows that people respond and investors respond to tax breaks. That's what all of this exercise has shown. And there are things that the government wants to encourage, such as investment in creches, investments in hospitals. We're going to continue to have tax breaks for certain investments. What we will have in the future is much greater information. The government will do cost-benefit analysis to the extent that that's possible when they bring in these things. And they'll review it much more on an ongoing basis. They won't leave them open-ended. And all of those things are likely to be discussed now in the coming weeks at the next stage of the finance bill, which is going to be debated in the Dáil, in the Oireachtas.
George, thanks very much for joining us.